Let's face it, these are challenging times for journalists, very challenging times, and they're about to get more so 5 days from now. Looking live here at the U.S. Capitol, preparations underway for President-elect Trump to take the oath of office, becoming our 45th president. Today, there's a brand new report in Esquire, a new report saying that Trump aides may want to evict the press corps. We have fresh reporting on that just coming in. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's look first at the bold truth-telling journalism that is happening. We all witnessed it this week when CNN reported that Intel chiefs, let's quote the headline here, Intel chiefs presented Trump with claims of Russian efforts to compromise him. These claims came partly from a former British intelligence agent's 35-page dossier. CNN did not print it or quote from it, but Buzzfeed did. The big news site Buzzfeed, even though this memo is full of unverified allegations, some of them known to be false. Was this a violation of journalistic ethics? Some media critics supported Buzzfeed, but many did not. So joining me now for an exclusive Sunday morning interview about this is Ben Smith, the editor-in-chief of the website. Ben, you made the call when this happened. Do you regret it now, a few days later? Do you have any regrets about publishing this entire document?
No, absolutely not. We're proud we published it, and I feel 3 days later it seems clear that it was the right thing to do if you look at how much more we know than we knew 3 days ago, and I think in 3 months it'll look even clearer.
What is it more that we know now that you believe justifies the decision?
We know this saga that dozens of journalists, intelligence officials, elected leaders knew of a former British spy creating this document, handing it over to the FBI, John McCain handing it to the FBI, of briefings which Jake Tapper and your team got an amazing scoop on, of the CIA briefing the president-elect of this, and really of an incredible fight at the highest levels of U.S. power, but away from the eyes of the American people, over this document, and over the claims that, as was in the headline you showed, the claims that CNN and many other outlets reported and repeated. And I guess our call was that in the first instance, once you have the document, as we did and many did, and we...
When did you get a hold of it?
I'm not going to say exactly, but weeks before we published it.
So you've had it for weeks before CNN published
Yes, and we,
story.
like you, I think like you, like certainly other outlets who we ran across in the reporting, were staking out places where we thought we could get information in Europe. We're running it down every way we could. And at some point, as Harry Reid is sending a letter based on it, as government and powerful officials are taking little actions based on it, not just sort of seeing it, but acting based on it, I think there becomes an argument, should you print it? We were having that conversation internally. We had not, certainly, we're not close to doing that. But then I think when your great scoop puts not just the fact of a document, but claims attributed in your reporting to a source seen as credible, and specific summaries of the claims into public, I think everybody's obligation then is to say, well, here are the actual claims. We're not just going to summarize
summaries of the claims, but CNN was very careful not to share those details.
No, what do you mean? I saw in that headline. The headline is claims he was compromised by Russian intelligence. That is an incredibly explosive claim. And to say, you and I have here between us a secret document with explosive, dark claims, and you guys on the other side of the camera can't see it, but we can. I don't really understand. I guess I'm sort of interested, actually, in... I see the case for reporting it out and not sharing it. I see the case for saying, here are these claims, here is this document at the center of the fight, take a look. I think I actually don't see the case for the middle position. I realize you're not a spokesman for CNN.
The middle position
and I don't mean to put
journalism.
No, the journalism that we were all doing was to try to verify the claims. Once you repeat them and put them out there, but to not share the underlying
the actual claims were not put out there. The story that CNN published and the story the New York Times published said that this was a topic briefed to the president-elect, and that's what the news was.
The headline that you just put up was claims that he was compromised by Russian intelligence.
But you're conflating these two the way the Trump aides have. What you're saying is you all published the claims. No, CNN did not, and neither did the New York Times or the Washington Post or others.
That he was compromised.
Nobody went into these sordid details,
the details, I agree,
that you all put up on the web.
I guess we thought that it was important when you have a blanket claim like he was compromised by Russian intelligence to share the details. I think that's important. I think our audience basically at this point expects you, and this is something you do on the internet with hyperlinks. You do it by showing your source documents that you can, but the default now is, if you want your audience to trust you, our job is not to primarily to be gatekeepers, to decide what to suppress and keep from our audience. It's primarily to share with our audience what we've got.
You say suppress. Journalists every day make editing decisions, and this was just an editing choice about not putting completely unverified rumors out onto the internet.
Well, you put some of them on the internet, you just didn't put the details on the internet, yes?
No, what happened from CNN and the New York Times and other outlets is they reported the existence of this concern inside the intelligence community and the existence of this briefing.
And several of the details of it. In summary, I agree, not the most explosive details, but the summary that he had been compromised. And I think that it was worth, there was a big difference between saying there are these dark and explosive claims that we're not going to tell you about, and here is the actual thing. I'm not sure reading the thing in our report which said, not only is this unverified, we know there are specific things wrong. I think that's important to put out there and to let people see the underlying document. That said, I also think reasonable people can really disagree on this, and they are. I don't think you are acting like a Trump aide. I don't think I am either. And I think like this was a close call. I'm not suggesting otherwise.
I'm trying to figure out if you all are Washington Post or WikiLeaks. It seems to me you're trying to be both, saying we're going to dump this document online. We don't know if it's real. We don't know. You know it's a real document. You don't know the truth. You don't know if the facts in it are true or not. That's not what the Washington Post or CNN or the New York Times would do. You all aspire to be one of the world's great news divisions. But aren't you trying to be more like WikiLeaks in this case?
We are, I think, well within the tradition of American journalism, which is every time you use the word alleged on your air, every time you see the word alleged in print or on the web, that is saying we are repeating a claim we can't verify. That is totally within the standard, particularly of covering law enforcement. But you'll hear that dozens of times on CNN, maybe dozens. You'll hear that word quite a bit in coverage. And I think from our perspective, if you are going to say that, your obligation then, if you've got the indictment, even if you think there's lots there that's false. In fact, if you can point to things that are false, if I can see it, if it's not going to scald my eyes out, I think it's a question to reasonably ask your audience. If I'm up here saying I have a secret document, I'm going to summarize for it, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable showing it to you because I'm not sure I can trust you with it. Do you feel that you shouldn't see it?
It's not about trusting the reader. I mean, let's put on screen what you said to the audience at the time. You said Americans can make up their own minds about allegations about the president-elect that have circulated around the intelligence community. But how can Americans or anybody else make up their own minds without providing reporting to them? How do you expect your readers to make up their own minds?
I think what I would say is that I think if you are going to report on a document, the presumption is that you share the document with your audience. Let them know what you know.
So that's where this is really interesting, right? I would say, and I think you and I agree on this, big, old-fashioned, established news organizations start from the premise of, why should we share this?
Yes.
You start from the premise of, why shouldn't we?
Why should we suppress this? Yes, that's where I start
And you use the word suppress.
I realize you think that's a little tendentious. Why shouldn't we share this?
But that's the fundamental, and that's a profound difference that we're describing between legacy media and digital media.
I think that's right. But I don't think it's a difference of values. I think we are trying to best inform our audience, to be true to our audience, to treat our audience with respect. I think you are too. I think these are different traditions of that. But I think that the conflation of that with deliberate deception is really inappropriate. We put this out with a very clear summary of what it was, where it came from, and that there were, and we really stressed that there were false things in this document.
You did, but why not publish a full reported explanation to the reader about what you've learned so far, what's false in it? Why not help them understand what they were seeing in this memo?
I mean, I don't think that you or I or the FBI apparently can say with great confidence that either they have stood this up or knocked it down.
There were some details that we both know were false.
And I do think there's a question.
You could have annotated that. You could have had a lot of redactions.
Oh, I see. I mean, I think right. I think there are levels of how many redactions, of how much annotation. We did point out the things that we really were very, very confident were false, in part to say to the reader, caveat emptor.
You did a little bit of that. Let's be honest. You rushed this out. CNN published, and you published a couple hours later, trying to get this on the internet as fast as possible.
I mean, it is both of our jobs to be as fast and as accurate as we can.
Accurate and then fast.
I think, yes, of course.
So Sean Spicer and other Trump aides tried to conflate what CNN published and what Buzzfeed published. Let's take a look, actually, at what Sean Spicer said the next day.
The fact that Buzzfeed and CNN made the decision to run with this unsubstantiated claim is a sad and pathetic attempt to get clicks. The report is not an intelligence report, plain and simple.
Were you trying to just get clicks?
I mean, I think Sean quoted me as he continued there and saying it was unverified. And I think, there's obviously an attempt right now to divide the press, to turn us on each other, and to turn reasonable differences about editorial decisions into screaming matches between us on this show. And I think that's probably not, I think that's that's a trap that the media has obviously repeatedly fallen into over the last couple of years, but I think it's better not to right now.
Okay, well, there's a tension between, yes, there are reasons to have unity. On the other hand, as CNN's Jake Tapper said, what you did was irresponsible, and that irresponsible journalism hurts us all.
I wouldn't say it was irresponsible to say, we have here a secret document, we're not going to share it. I would disagree with that, but I think it's a reasonable call.
So it's not possible to have unity in the press corps if BuzzFeed's acting more like WikiLeaks, just dumping material on the internet and telling the audience to decide if it's true or not.
I think we reported a very important story about that was
reporting,
a development.
You just publish. There's a difference between publishing and reporting.
We just explained the origin of the document. We described the extent to which it was accurate and inaccurate, and we shared information that was by the way, that not just the head of the CIA, that dozens, if not hundreds, of journalists, intelligence officials, elected leaders were seeing and acting on. And I do think when you have a document in that kind of circulation among the country's elites at the center of an incredibly heated political battle, the argument for keeping it away from the American people has to be really, really strong.
I'm glad we're talking about this because I think for the audience at home, it's hopefully educational and
and I think
informative.
they should, and I would, if I were them, ask themselves, do I not want to see this? Do I not feel that I am responsible? Do I not feel that I can handle the notion that this document is not verified, that I can't trust the claims in it, but that it is this document at the center of this fight?
Let me give you one more example to try to frame this. In 2013, you wrote about a decision not to go with a story about allegations of prostitutes and a U.S. senator. This was a Democratic U.S. senator. You decided not to go with it specifically because it wasn't verified. Here's what you wrote at the time. Stanton, McKay, Coppins, and I felt more or less vindicated in making the traditional don't touch it call when the story appeared to fall apart, or at least got murkier in a way that stories based on the testimonies of anonymous prostitutes in foreign countries are vulnerable to. Now this 35-page memo also has lots of anonymous information, unverified information. What's the difference now? Is the difference that Donald Trump's a Republican?
No, the main difference is CNN initially is great scoop that the President of the United States and the President-elect were being briefed on that document. Had this document, I think, I'm actually not going to mention the case because I don't want to get it wrong, but
right.
I'm pretty sure I know which U.S. Senator we're talking about here. Had that document been picked up by the FBI and briefed to the President of the United States, I think it would have been inappropriate of us to say, but we're not going to show it to you.
Has anyone from
And I guess
Trump's...
conversely, you and I get email every day making outlandish charges against people and that are not widely circulated among the American elites that,
So
that
for you,
U.S.
the big
senators are not
difference
acting
was
on.
senators, intelligence officials, and journalists all had this.
Not just seeing it, but acting on it.
Acting
People are
on it.
making decisions based on it.
Has anyone from Trump's transition team or the Trump organization threatened to sue BuzzFeed this week?
I guess I'm not always sure that I can identify on Twitter who specifically works for Trump and his transition.
You're saying you've received tweets from people
I've gotten
threatening to sue?
I've gotten tweets, many tweets this week.
But no legal letter from any authority?
No.
I asked because there's been threats of suits in the past, but we haven't seen that from Trump this week.
It's also a tradition that you don't report on lawsuit. I think now discarded American journalistic tradition of not reporting on lawsuit threats before they've been filed. But no, there haven't been any.
Do you worry or do you care that publishing this sort of inoculated Donald Trump, that it conflated all these news outlets and allowed him to just dismiss it entirely by calling you a failing pile of garbage?
I mean, I saw this, I really didn't understand this. I saw that evening and the next morning people saying, this was the moment after 2.5 years of really getting totally rolled by Donald Trump, and in many cases apologizing for coverage of Donald Trump, that this was the morning this was the morning the media was gonna turn it around and really do a fantastic job and hold him to account, and had only BuzzFeed not published this. And I really do think that's a fantasy.
What's the BuzzFeed model for covering Trump going forward? Because you wrote a really interesting memo last month to your staff saying practically every story now, it all comes back to Trump. All roads lead back to Trump. What's your strategy for covering Trump in the weeks and months ahead?
First, I would say I don't think it all comes back to Trump. I think it all comes back to a broader, we're a global organization with reporters all over the place in the UK and France, and I think it comes back to this broader kind of rise of global nationalism, and that's sort of the story that I feel like is at the center of things. But really, I think I'm really proud of how we covered him all through the campaign, which is we were fair, we were tough, we didn't, and I think we never engaged in the kind of fantasy of the Trump pivot, that he was somebody other than he was going to be. And I think we also reckoned with, as you do, this very challenging fact that he and his spokespeople say things that aren't true all the time. And I think you have to engage that very directly. So I think we plan to continue to cover him like that.
BuzzFeed was blacklisted for much of the campaign.
We were the charter.
Outlets were not
member.
given press credentials. Do you expect that in the White House?
I don't know. I mean, we have not had any trouble covering Donald Trump since about October.
And last June, Trump told me no, he will not, if he's elected president, be banning reporters from the press briefing room. However, now we're 5 days away. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
Ben, good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks, Brian.
Coming up next here on the program, an all-star panel of media observers and decision makers standing by with their thoughts on BuzzFeed's decision. And later in the hour, Fox News and its biggest star, Bill O'Reilly, now in the news. Fox quietly settling sexual harassment claims against him. How's O'Reilly being treated by Fox? How's that compare to Roger Ailes' departure from the network? We'll cover that in a few minutes.